my extended essay was the portrait of knowledge, knowledge control, fear, and entertainment in two dystopian novels, which I chose Fahrenheit 451 and 1984 to analyze. And I'm Mateo Rattazzi, and I'm a student of Colegio Ágora Madrid International School. Right, so first I'll contextualize you on both novels in case you haven't read them, then introduce how I came up with the research question, then I will talk about the three main themes: knowledge, entertainment, and fear, then come up with a conclusion on how they differ in each novel, and then share some final thoughts on the themes. Right, so first, 1984 was published in 1949, and it's inspired in the Spanish Civil War and the dictatorship after it, because George Orwell actually participated in it. And Winston Smith is a protagonist who is a member of the inner party in the state Oceania, and his job is to rewrite history, and the omnipresent symbol of Big Brother is constant in the novel to remind citizens that they're being watched. Whereas in Fahrenheit 451, it's published in 1953, and it's inspired in the post-Second World War period of McCarthyism, which is a period where there was a fear of left-wing radicalism, and there was persecution and accusations based on this. The protagonist is Guy Montag, and he is a fireman that his job is to burn books and extract knowledge in that sense. And the novel is set in the United States, where firemen burn books and citizens absorb entertainment, similarly to present-day life, except for the firemen. Right, so introduction. So these two novels are part of the first books to criticize directly powerful nations such as the Soviet Union, which I will analyze later on. So the themes are knowledge, which is treated through the suppression and repression of it; fear, which is indirectly and directly installed; and entertainment, which is omnipresent and a constant in citizens' lives. Right, so this led me to the question of how do George Orwell 1984 and Ray Bradbury in Fahrenheit 451 differently emphasized knowledge control, entertainment, and fear as essential elements of their dystopian societies to maintain control. So moving on to my methodology, I compared both books from my analysis and using other references and their interpretations. Right, so knowledge. Knowledge is power, as said by Francis Bacon, 1597, so therefore those who possess knowledge have an advantage over those who don't, which is a principle in these novels. So in 1984, knowledge is manipulated. This is done through the constant revision of history, where who controls the past, controls the future, controls the present, controls the past. In that sense, they rewrite history so that the party is always right, no matter what they say in the present. Then there's also a concept of doublethink in the novel, where citizens are able to think two contradictory thoughts at the same time, which makes them gullible to whatever the party says, as they have to believe it, because even though it contradicts with their memories, it's still true. Then there's also the newspeak, which is a dictionary that is constantly being updated with the party, and they constantly restrict the words that citizens can speak in order to limit the critical thought and, well, basically the amount of words they can say. So this leads to their slogan, ignorance is strength, which can be reread as your ignorance is our strength in the sense of the party's strength. Then in Fahrenheit, knowledge is suppressed as they believe a book is a loaded gun which only inflicts harm. This leads to books being burned in society, and also they treat it as a manner for societal order, as those who, well, through the quote, if you don't want a man unhappy politically, don't give him two sides to a question to worry him, give him one, better yet, give him none. This refers even to the United States, where there are only two parties you can actually vote. There's no left-wing parties as there are in Europe. Also, there's a contrasting point of view with the suppression of knowledge, as actually citizens in this novel have evolved to actually prefer entertainment and shorter forms of dopamine, such as the TVs, where instead of reading books, which is culturally richer. So this is an image of Nazi Germany burning books, which is another inspiration for Fahrenheit 451. Moving on to entertainment, ignorance is bliss, as said by Gray in 1742. So in 1984, entertainment is treated through the traditional carnal needs of citizens, whereas in Fahrenheit it's treated through the technological advancements of the novel. So in 1984 we find the key elements to be pornography and alcohol, which are free and they're given out to the party because they want citizens to have them. Gambling, which is fake as there are no rewards paid out to the citizens, but it creates hope to the proles, which are the proletarians in the novel, that they can actually become something. And then propaganda, which is basically a 2-minute hate where citizens use it every now and then to direct hate towards their enemies. So this keeps them entertained and certainly distracted from their miserable reality. Then in Fahrenheit, there's the use of parlor walls, which are symbolic of TVs nowadays, and we find that in the quote, "That's my family," said by by the wife of the protagonist, indicating how addicted they are to these televisions. Then we find seashells to be radio devices that citizens have in their ears, and they resemble radios nowadays that keep them constantly entertained. And then another important but minorly discussed in this novel element is the fast cars. So there's actually a speed minimum that citizens must go to when driving cars, which leads them to be unable to think, because they have to constantly be on watch in order to not crash. This resembles how they don't want citizens to be thinking and to be just entertained constantly. Lastly, the element of fear. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself, as said by Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1932. And we can see this as fear is one of the key elements to maintain authoritarian states in control. So in 1984, it's treated through surveillance and consequences. In surveillance, we find the use of telescreens, microphones, and the thought police who monitors what you're actually thinking, so you can't even think of rebelling against them. And then the slogan, "Big Brother is watching you," is pretty self-explanatory. And then there's the use of the Youth League, which is present in all of the authoritarian states studied in history in IB, which is the use of young children to spy on adults. So an example of this is the arrest of a minor character in 1984 for saying "down with Big Brother" in his sleep, and his daughter actually reported him. Then consequences, we find the Ministry of Love, which is actually a torture center, leading to it being ironic. The ideological re-education of criminals. An example of this is Winston, the protagonist, coming to believe that 2 + 2 = 5, which is not real, but through torture, psychologically and physically, he comes to believe this. Then power is not a means, it's an end, which indicates how the party wants to be in control and not achieve it. And then that death and torture are omnipresent in society, because in the 2-minute hate, they're also watching like prisoners of war march, and they're going to be killed essentially. So they are always watching them. And then the scapegoats, which represent the Soviet Union in Goldstein, Jones, and Rutherford. Goldstein being Leon Trotsky, which was persecuted by Stalin when he came to power, and we find this to be another example of criticizing the Soviet Union by Orwell. Then this is a graphical representation, which does not appear in the novel, but gives you an idea of the powerfulness of their slogans: "In war is peace, ignorance is strength, and freedom is slavery," and how they're contradicting to our standards, but how in the novel they're used to keep citizens at bay. So in Fahrenheit, it's treated through social conformity and violence, where citizens they report, like surveillance is conducted to citizens actually reporting those who rebel, because they're actually happy, even though it's superficially. They're content with the entertainment they're provided, they enjoy the dopamine they're getting. So when even the protagonist keeps a book rebelling against the party, his wife looks to report him, but he prevents this by persuading her. But in the same instant she found out, she tried to report him to the authorities. Then violence is treated through symbols of destruction and death, such as the fireman and mechanical hand. And there's also violent demonstrations of books being burned when they are found, leading to people not wanting to rebel at any means. And also thanatophobia, which is the extreme fear of death, which influences your actions, happening in citizens who look to rebel, which we can see in the protagonist Guy Montag. So the conclusion is that knowledge in 1984 is treated through the systematic revision and rewriting of history, where it's treated through the direct destruction in Fahrenheit 451, Entertainment is treated through the use of anger and propaganda, representative of society during war, while in Fahrenheit 451 is treated through hedonistic and amusing entertainment. And then fear, in 1984, is treated through the omnipresent surveillance and the consequences of defiance, while in Fahrenheit 451, there's a social conformity and net that reports citizens who rebel, and there's also repression symbols such as the fireman and the mechanical hand. So final thoughts are that the main lessons treated in both novels are knowledge is power, ignorance is bliss, and the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Thank you very much.